Last week, the message on this channel was beware of Friday's event, that being the crypto summit, as these are typically sell the news type of events. And in today's price action, we can see the follow through from that Friday sell-off. So I want to come back at the short and medium term here because, well, it is more or less unchanged. I am still bearish there. But as we have been going over on the higher term timeframes, I do think that Bitcoin is due for, a pretty decent bounce, maybe even a reversal, not so far off from the current low, which, could still be maybe down to like low 70s. We'll get into that a little bit later. But first and foremost, I do want to go over the short term, or the very short term here. We can see that Bitcoin opened up with yet another gap down from Friday's closure. Gap would be filled somewhere around 85 to 86,000 bucks. Anywhere there is fine. So in the short term, do we see a rally around these regions? Probably yes. But I would be very cognizant that these are typically pushback regions, and if Bitcoin is going to move lower, we kind of would expect the rally to be arrested there. And we do see a pretty clear and obvious trend going on right now as well, based upon that Friday closure. We have lower lows and lower highs, and that really changed up back on over here from, this was, the 24th of February. That's when we started to get bearish on this channel, at least for the short and medium term, as trends did flip. And now we have a lower low, a lower high, slightly higher low right there, another lower high, and perhaps another low right here. But if we get another lower high, I'd say that's probably going to be your indication that Bitcoin is going to break down two new lows from the current low of Friday, the 28th of February. So again, in the short, medium term, I'm still bearish here. Yes, there's going to be short-term rallies, of course, but the most obvious area, at least in my opinion, to flip around to being bullish is actually the same area that we spoke about last week. It's simply that last Monday's, the 3rd of March's high, which was on CME 95,700, on spot price action a little bit less than that. So, as long as Bitcoin's below there, I'm generally going to be looking short-term sideways and down. But as we have gone over many times in the past, I actually do think that the downside is not going to be, that far off from the current low. In my opinion, over the long term, like if it's 10% differential, that's not like a huge, it's not like a huge issue in my opinion, especially, considering Bitcoin's historical moves. But before we get into that, I do want to once again go over the higher term timeframes here, because stochastic momentum is once again all on the same side. We can see here daily stochastic momentum on CME is going to be crossing down, assuming that Bitcoin closes today out below 85,450. That is where the gap is. So, I do think that we probably get an attempt around that region, but that would be the area that you'd be expecting a rejection on if it is indeed going to reject. The 2-day time frame also continuing downside here on CME as long as Bitcoin's closing below 85,500. So same pivot there as the daily essentially. 3-day time frame also downside angled, heavily in the bearish control zone now, as long as Bitcoin's below 89,000. 5-day time frame also nosediving here below 102,800. That's actually quite a surprise to see it that fucking high. The weekly, which just opened up today, also showing downward momentum as long as Bitcoin's below 101,300. The 10-day time frame also coming down here as long as Bitcoin's below 97,000 bucks. The bi-weekly time frame, which did not close this past week but will be closing this week, also downside angled as long as Bitcoin's below 100,000 bucks. And the monthly is also is probably the most concerning thing to me, not just because it's the highest term time frame, but you have bearish divergence plus losing the bullish critical zone. That's typically the end of end of the move for a while, and that one is pivoted at 102. So hopefully, for the boo law's sake, there is a reclaim of 102,000 bucks before end of this month. But for right now, it looks less and less likely to me, to be honest. Anyways, let's go over this week's range. I think that the HPDR gets us one incredibly well. So let me just go to the weekly here, and if we put on our actual bands, we can see. Let's go to CME. We can see the range is very obviously between the 61.8 level to the upside, which is 87,320. So, maybe Bitcoin gets a wick up there on a rally attempt. And to the downside, essentially the lows from February, which was about 78,000 bucks. Meaning that, I would be expecting another short-term bounce attempt there. I don't think that Bitcoin is necessarily going to slice through the downside on its first attempt. Like I said, short-term, like very, very short-term, probably pops up, fills that gap, but that doesn't change the not as short term and medium term, that downside still more likely. And if it does break below $78,000, I think we've gone over my areas of interest for this many times, but basically $70,000, give or take a few thousand from that number. The main thing that I'd not want to see if I want to have a long-term bullish bias is Bitcoin coming back down below those November lows, which was $67,000. So don't want to cut it too close there, but a Bitcoin, as long as Bitcoin's above, I do think that keeps the bull hopium somewhat alive in the long term. Second, that Bitcoin comes back down and trades below that low, there will be rallies, there will be bounces, but that's where I actually start to switch on to saying, hey, we're in like an actual bear market right now, or Bitcoin's in an actual bear market. You and I are just people living in the world, anyways. So yes, here's, however, why I also do hold on to some hopium as well. One of them being, or there's several reasons here. One of them being the 5-day HPDRO. It has indeed hit the very critical levels that we have seen many times in this past bull market. Anytime it gets, especially below about -50, which I've marked off all these prior times, and we are seeing another time over here. These have correlated to some of the most important lows that Bitcoin's seen since 2022, when this bull market began. Now, were all of them perfect? No. In fact, this one literally is not even on there, so I should probably get rid of it. But all of the rest of them, did correspond really, really well to the low, or very close to very, 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 very close to the low in terms of closing price action. So for this one here, closes at about 56,700. Yes, Bitcoin does come down a little bit lower, but doesn't really close that far off. Same shit with this one over here as well. And all the other ones were pretty much great timing of the lows, not necessarily of the next move up, but certainly of those lows. So, if this is going to play out, if we are going to see the 5-day HPRO suggest that Bitcoin is going to regain its footing here, well, we'd be expecting it to turn back up, hopefully soon, which right now it is down, actually. We will get another update on this tomorrow. So of course we'll go over that, when applicable. Also on the bull hopium side, this chart's been making the rounds on crypto Twitter. And, I think that this has been popularized by Raoul Pal, and there does seem to be validity to it, which is the Bitcoin price versus global M2 money supply chart. Bitcoin price in blue here, the green representing global liquidity. And the idea is that global liquidity has essentially mirrored Bitcoin's price action, maybe operating a little bit further in advance of Bitcoin price action, but, pretty damn close, pretty damn on the money, to be fair. And this one is actually turning up pretty aggressively here after hitting new lows this past week, or the past few days, really. And it's just been moving up ever since then. So, does that suggest that Bitcoin's going to go up from this exact moment? No, but I do think that it's going to get a pretty decent bounce relatively soon. Does that mean that Bitcoin, moves a little bit lower than the current low or not? Again, I don't have strong opinions on this, but a bounce, likely is going to be there. But that's when the very critical area that we spoke about earlier comes into play here. And that is just as simple as it gets, right fucking here. If Bitcoin can trade back above this high, then things start to look quite good. And of course, now that the daily time frame has come down again and actually closed on new lows, there will be a real opportunity to actually confirm some regular bullish divergence on the daily RSI. It's not there just yet, obviously. This is like a multi-day process, but in this case, the RSI is significantly higher than where that last low was from late February. So divergence will be possible. That also does mean, though, we can see it come back down a little bit closer to that prior low before that divergence starts to play out. So I would be aware of that, but it is starting to build in the background. Does Bitcoin get a washout to like 75,000 or 74,000 first and then play that out? Again, I'm going to be more inclined to say that just because of trend here. As long as Bitcoin is below $95,000, the most likely direction is to the downside with bounces along the way. But if I'm putting two and two together and kind of painting a little bit of a bull hopium picture here, which I know a lot of people really love, maybe it looks something like this. Very short term, rallies back to fill that gap, sells back off, tests somewhere down around here, and then you get a big bounce playing out, hopefully multiple drives of bullish divergence at that point. That would be a very obvious signal to me for, a humongous bounce, something, similar to this, similar global liquidity levels to what we saw back on over that first attempt above $100,000, but for Bitcoin, that is. But this can take many forms here, obviously. On top of that, I did also want to go over this as well. This one's a little bit more nuanced, but the 10-day time frame for Bitcoin spot price action does have one of these long-term regressions that has been governing the lows on Bitcoin ever since, essentially the low of this cycle, which was in 2022. And all of these points can connect with, major lows on Bitcoin price action, and actually timed quite well as well, I would say. But all of these get the biggest, most important pivots for Bitcoin. Anyways, this trend line is coming in, admittedly, lower than where the 10-day stochastic oscillator is right now. But you can imagine that within two to three more periods, this one will test that trend line and probably expect it to hold if Bitcoin is going to be bullish. That would also be a good early indication that Bitcoin is going to, really actually initiate a real bear market if it does really start to break below there on a closing base. But for right now, to give it a chance to bounce, again. And of course, because each and every one of these, each and every tick represents a 10-day period, which with the next one beginning actually tomorrow, that would be, 20 to maybe even 30 days out from now, when it is going to hit there. Now, if Bitcoin really dumped off hard from here, I guess it could theoretically maybe even hit it on the next period, but we'll see. Again, I'm just kind of guesstimating there. Anyways, yes, so we've gotten all of that. I think the last thing that I want to leave you with here is something that I know a lot of people hate now, but of course, at the end of the day, statistics are what they are. They're just simple numbers that give you some sort of benchmarks to go off of. They're not always going to be perfect, but I did want to bring back up the Bitcoin March open to low stats, because we do see a couple things here. One, if this month is going to be positive, meaning a positive March, on average, we've seen a difference between the open of the month versus the low of the month, even for positive closing Marches, about 7% on average, drawdown. So what would that look like for price here? Well, we already obviously have the monthly open, so let's just shave off about 7% from there. That'd put Bitcoin at about $78,000, the current low. I do think that is very likely to get re-hit again, or very close to it, if it hasn't already. Again, even if it's a positive month, we do kind of expect somewhere down around there. Now, for negative closing Marches, which this very well might be, we actually have only seen one negative closing March with a less than double-digit percent drawdown, if you want to call it that. That was in 2015. It was actually still close to double digits, but it was 782 to be specific. All other ones come in as pretty major downside moves, giving us an average of about 20% differential between the open and the low of the month. So if we were to play out, a little bit closer to that, 20% down puts you where? That puts you kind of close to my sort of point of no return, which is the low of November, but anywhere around there would, be enough. Again, these don't need to be exact. They just need to be, they're not going to be exact, but of course, it's statistics. Like, it'll be somewhere around there, most likely. Again, assuming, Bitcoin does close March out negatively. So, we could see a move down there, then pop back up, still close, negatively, and then hopefully, some sort of Hail Mary in April. But yeah, anyways, just showing, that for right now, still within the data set, it's not anything like super concerning. For like the very long term, obviously, if you're in the short term, that's complete fucking garbage. I mean, I've seen alts just die across the board. It's actually insane. Well, it's not so insane, I guess. Anyways, that's where we're going to end things for today. Jesus, man. Yeah, that's where we'll end things for today. As always, I want to wish everyone the best. Take care, much love, and actually just maybe a quick recap as well. Okay. very, very short term, like today, tomorrow, if Bitcoin wants to rally up and fill that cap, go for it. However, as long as Bitcoin is below that Sunday or not this past Sunday, but the one before that, or last Monday's high, I'm still going to be looking for overall downside. However, I do think that downside is generally limited. So, short-term bounce, come down a little bit more, hopefully play out some, hopefully start to confirm some divergences, and then, okay, let's try for like a real bounce. And if hopium does apply, then, I'd be looking for something like this over here. But that's really all that I have for now. And tomorrow we'll be back with another live stream analysis. So take care, much love, and see you next time.